Hello, hello, hello. So glad to have you guys back on our podcast. It is time for episode 2 of the Nativity Podcast. I am Father Ed Bresnahan, parochial vicar here at Nativity in Burke.
And I'm Mary Castellano, your social media coordinator.
And we are so glad to have you. Today we are joined by Diane Fields, who is one of our wonderful longtime parishioners and head of many, many ministries in our parish. So we're really grateful. You're going to hear some amazing stuff today. We have a great episode in store for you. A special thank you to all the people who gave us some feedback from the last week's episode or last time's episode, I should say. Really gave us a lot of positive feedback and constructive thoughts, but also just a lot of support and joy. A lot of people very excited to hear what we're doing here. So we'd like to continue to bring you great content and like to continue to bring you closer to Christ through the amazing things that our little parish in Burke, Virginia is doing. So that said, there's a thing that happens like regionally around like the sporting world. And so they do this thing where they always try to figure out who the most iconic members of like a city would be. And they always use the image of Mount Rushmore. Like who would go? Like, because Mount Rushmore, for those of you who don't know, has like 4 of the most important presidents of the United States carved into the side of the mountain, right?
It's just a little thing.
Just a little thing. It's a great tourist destination at this point. But anyway, more importantly, people use that as sort of a foil for trying to figure out, well, who would be on the DC, who would be on for Washington, DC, or who would be on there for Los Angeles, California. And everybody does this kind of like, debate back and forth. But I love, long before Mount Rushmore was ever created, the church has also done something similar. If you go to somewhere like Notre Dame in Paris, the facade of the Church of Notre Dame features 4 pillars that you can't walk through the door of the cathedral without seeing these 4 pillars. And on the 4 pillars are the 4 most important saints for the city of Paris. Like long before, it's almost like we were hipster, like we were there first, right? We were there before it was cool. We had a Mount Rushmore before Mount Rushmore was cool. So I gotta ask, Mary, if you were gonna have like the facade of Notre Dame and there was gonna be a church dedicated to Saint Mary of Castellano.
Oh my gosh.
I know this is sometimes we talk about like what you'd be the patron saint of, but I love the image of like who would be your 4? Who would be like the go-to? Who would be like the iconic? Like these are the 4 that are most influential in the life of Mary Castellano.
Oh man, that's a great question, Father. I'd have to say, number 1, my confirmation saint, Saint Helena of the Cross. She was the mother of Constantine, the emperor, and I picked her as my confirmation saint because she was a queen, she was of nobility, but she loved the poor. And later on in her life, she went to Jerusalem to find the original pieces of the cross. So she's amazing. I really love her. So she would be 1, Saint Helena, Saints Monica and Saint Augustine. I also really love them. 2 big heavy hitters, but I love their relationship. I read the Confessions in college, and then I watched the awesome movie called Restless Heart. And man, I love the way they portrayed both of those saints, especially Saint Monica. She just had a fantastic relationship with her son. She just told him how it was. She said it like it is. And so I really admire both of them. And then another personal favorite of mine, I don't have a concrete reason why I love this saint. I just know that I love her, Saint Philomena.
That's Philomena.
Yeah, and I'd heard the name growing up, but I don't know if it was because of Saint Philomena or because my great-grandmother's name is Philomena. So I kind of have an affection for both kind of representations of the name, but then I read a little bit of her story and how she was this beautiful martyr, and then she has this whole story, and yeah, so I just love her, and something about she has a really powerful intercession with God. So
no, she's definitely a go-to. Actually, there's something connected between your facade of Notre Dame and mine. Oh. Because if I was going to pick 4, I think obviously I would have to pick John Vianney, who John Vianney is the patron saint of parish priests, and since I am a parish priest, he's a good example. Although if I tried to aspire to be like him, I don't know that I have like the mental capacity to do it. Not just because he's like smart. Obviously, he's brilliant and holy and a wonderful soul, but he would literally hear 14 hours of confessions a day. Right. I mean, just hours in the confessional. I mean, I could probably do like 14 hours of sleep or like 14 hours of lunch. But I don't know. I mean, and I love confessions. I love hearing confessions, and I love how life-changing they can be for people. But man, like, it'd be hard to hear 14 hours in a day. So, but John Vianney is a wonderful example of life-giving, sacrificial service as a priest, and so a good model for me. I'd also pick. I'm with you in the confirmation. Oh, I should say I'm sorry. I totally blanked on this one, but he had a devotion to Saint Philomena.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So when you said Philomena, I was like, oh wait, my guy really liked Saint Philomena too. So we could be like neighboring cathedrals. Like our
There we
cathedrals
go.
could be like right next to each other.
Saint Ed Bresnahan right next to Saint Castellano.
Saint Castellano. So I would put I'd put him. I actually put Saint Edward there too. Saint Edward was a king in England. He wanted to be a priest, but his family needed him to be a king. And the way that I understand it was that with all of the general corruption that tends to happen with like monarchies and the kind of backstabbing and all of that, I think there was a great need that they wanted somebody that they could trust, and they trusted the guy who didn't want to be the king much more than they trusted the people who very, very overtly wanted to be the king. He still lived a very holy and a very austere life. So by all accounts, was actually a very benevolent king to the people of England. So I like the idea of Saint Edward as one of those pillars. And then I think I would also throw in, you never really throw in a saint, do you? Like, I mean, I think we kind of encourage the saints. But I really love, and I've grown to love him with my time in the high school and everything like that. I've really grown to love and appreciate the writings and the wisdom of Saint Francis de Sales. Francis de Sales was the one person whose book was well received in the middle of the wars of religion, in the middle of the Protestant Catholic violence that was happening over Europe in the 1600s. And his book, The Introduction to the Devout Life, was one of the few books that was widely accepted in both Calvinist circles and in Catholic circles. He's the patron of journalists. He would sneak out at night in the middle of dangerous and treacherous things to be able to toss pamphlets and catechetical material under the doorsteps of people in his village to help maintain their faith and strengthen them in a lot of difficult division. So, great example of faith. And I think one of my last favorite is probably Saint Edith Stein. I love Saint Teresa Benedict of the Cross. Probably a personal favorite because she suffered hardship and endured her crosses with grace, no matter what it was. And she endured them, not just because she died at the hands of the Nazis in fighting in fighting that evil and injustice, but also, I mean, she was probably one of the smartest philosophers of her time, and basically the chief TA of one of the most well-known philosophers. Husserl at the time was I think that's the guy. But he didn't write her a recommendation to become the chair of the university that she was applying to, because he didn't believe that at the time. He didn't believe a woman should have that position, and so she endured a great many things that, despite being the obvious choice for a lot of things, she was looked over or passed over for so many things. But she didn't use those opportunities to just become embittered. She used those as opportunities to move on to the next best thing for her. And each of those things led her first to be a convert from Judaism, then to joining a religious order, writing some beautiful work of literature, and then ultimately led to her martyrdom at the hands of the Nazis in Auschwitz. So.
Wow.
It's just a great example of faith in life. I love the idea of being able to endure, even when you know you're the smartest person or the best qualified or something like that, to still be able to persevere.
Mm-hmm. What an all-star team.
That's a good all-star team.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
they hit on a lot of different things. That's really cool. So Diane, who would what is it? What was the question?
Yeah, who'd be on the facade of the cathedral for you?
When you first posed that question, I immediately thought, if I had a facade and there were 4 pillars, it would have to be Jesus, Mary, Joseph. And for the 4th pillar, it would definitely be Peter and Paul.
I like it.
Because I'm a twin, and I've always lived my life with kind of one voice. So I think that's why I thought of Peter and Paul. And they were just so important to bringing God's message and the message to our world and to us. And recently, as I've learned to read Scripture, Paul's words are just so very important and so real, and so that's why I thought of Peter and Paul. And of course, we know Peter's position. He's the one that was the beginning of the Pope, the reign of the Pope, and the rock of our church.
Isn't it amazing? I love what you said about one voice. So two people with one voice, right? When you think of Peter and Paul's message about being Christ to others, what a great image. Plus, I mean, you can't go wrong with Jesus. Got to put Jesus on the front. Jesus and his mother.
Mary and Joseph. And Joseph, he's been getting more attention this year since it's the year of St. Joseph. And we've learned a lot about him because there is so much to read about. And now they're writing more books about Joseph. And I've always said for years, Joseph never gets enough credit for what he did.
That's so true.
So I was very happy to see Year of St. Joseph here.
That's fantastic. I love this. Like, there's going to be like a line of cathedrals, and each one's going to have different people's saints on them, and I think that'd be great. So that's a great question. I think I'd love to pose to anybody who'd love to share. Why would you pick, and who would you pick for your four? Who would be your cathedral pillars? Well, oh my gosh. Well, that's what an exciting way to start. And we have all kinds of good things happening today. Last time we talked about our work in mission and our work in giving of ourselves materially, but there's so much that goes into a church. And if we're not talking about maybe the development of the spiritual life and the development of what's at the core of all of it, then we sometimes can miss out on what we're doing. Right? I think Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and the rest will be given to you. So everything, and Jim talked about this last time a little bit. He talks about the idea that it's a product of prayer, right? It's a fruit of prayer. And so coming on, and we're so grateful and so glad to be able to welcome Diane onto our program today, because Diane is really at the heart and the soul of a lot of what's been going on in our parish from a spiritual standpoint. And I don't just mean a sacramental standpoint. The priests are doing a lot of work here. We have some amazing guys that you'll hear from in other episodes. But in terms of finding those places where our laity is able to grow in their devotion to Christ and to learn a little bit more about their faith, Diane, you will almost always find Diane in one of those places.
Yes.
So Diane, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the parish?
Well, we're a military family. We moved here in 1987, so it's been more than 30 years.
Oh, my goodness.
When we moved, we had 4 children here. We had 2 in college and 1 in high school, junior high, and 1 in preschool. And when our children were younger, we always involved ourselves with the parish in the CCD program. So when we first came here, that was one thing we were involved in. And when we came to Nativity, I was really impressed. I thought, this is a well-established church, but at the same time, it's kind of new, because when we walked in, there were folding chairs in the main church.
Wow.
And they struggled with where we're going to teach CCD. And so the first year I taught, I got my little corner in the church because they had moved all the chairs around so you could have your corner. And I thought, this is a struggle. This is a challenge for us. But I'm thinking probably the only thing that those students remembered from the CCD is that there was this lady who showed up every week and she talked about Jesus. So I think that's one of the reasons we taught CCD, was that we learned to talk about Jesus. We learned to talk about God in our life. We learned, what happened. We have this book, the scripture we're supposed to read. And, so we were able to bring that to the children. And, of course, when you teach something, you actually learn it better for yourself.
Oh, man, it's so essential. Once I started preaching, I realized I needed to learn a little bit more than
that's right.
That's fantastic. So now, obviously, it's transitioned a little bit. Your kids have grown. Do you still teach CCD, or what other kinds of things have you branched into?
Well, like many other parents, maybe when your children graduate from high school, maybe you graduate to other ministries in the church. So we don't teach CCD now, although it is very hard to say no to Sister Mary Attilia. Oh my gosh, she even called my husband to say, can you come and teach CCD again? So I think we talk about ministries of the church, and I just have to recognize that sometimes the ministries in the church are not always church activities. For about 12 years, I took care of my mom at home in Maryland. So I was doing that, and that was my main ministry. And we learned a lot from just being a caregiver, just a real sensitivity about what caregivers go through. And then one of the ministries that I was involved in was grief support group.
Sure.
Soon after we came back here to Virginia, I went back to work and I went into hospice nursing. Carol Mack came and approached me and said, would we like to help facilitate a grief group? And I said, okay, well, I guess we can do that. We're hospice nurses. We got some of the vocabulary and talking. We understand what some of them would have gone through. So, yeah, I think we could do that. And both of us had gone through our own losses. So I said, so yes, we were open to that. So they sent us for 2 days of training, and then we started the grief support group. And it was amazing to me, I do have to say the grief support group is still going on. And it started in 1998.
Oh, wow.
So you can figure it's more than 20 years now. And we have wonderful people that continue to lead it. The main thing that happens in the support group was a little different in that it didn't actually tell you how to grieve or what to do or what's going to happen. It actually was a sharing group so that people would just share where they are. And what I saw was really people helping other people in their loss. It helped them to learn how to live God's will and to live with that loss.
That's amazing.
Was.
So at this point, is it a growing group or is it a group? How do people get referred to to the grief support group?
Well, hopefully the priest will tell them that
okay.
if they come to the priest or the pastoral
Taking notes, Father?
I am taking notes.
People that will know, if they ask, they'll know that there is a grief support group. It actually meets twice a month, and it is a drop-in system. So there's, like I say, no scheduled program. It really is a sharing group. And it's continued for 20 years, and there's always several people. Sometimes they're larger groups, sometimes it's just smaller. In the very beginning, they started meeting socially. Once a month, some of the women and the men would like to get together, and so they did that for many years, and that still may be going on. So they formed friendships, too, and people that had common experiences are comfortable with each other.
That sounds amazing. I feel like there's some really great fruit that comes out of even the most difficult situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you seen I guess maybe a really great way to kind of follow up with that is just to be able to see, have you been able to see God's handiwork in this sharing process and the ability for some of these people, not to get things fixed per se, but to recognize that they're not alone?
Recognize that they're
No, you're fine.
Not alone.
I do that every day.
You said before, we were kind of brainstorming a little before we started recording. You said that just being able to share and not necessarily be told, here's a problem to fix. Here's a way to share with each other and walk with each other and learn how to live without this person, because I know exactly what that's like. 2 years ago, I lost my brother to a car accident. And it was Carol Mack who gave me one of the best pieces of advice that has helped me still to this day. And Carol said, it's learning to live without the person. That is going to be the hardest thing. And so, Diane, you were sharing before we started recording, this sort of sharing helps give people the vocabulary to kind of help each other grieve.
Yes. What happens is there are many times people will come and they're just so filled with that emotion that it's very difficult for them to express. They've never experienced it before because the mind and the heart are in different places. So that we'd have women come and they would sit and they would come back, but they would sit and they wouldn't say anything. And then finally hearing the words and realizing that our people are going through the same experience, I see that's when God would really touch their hearts and they might be able to say a few things and then they would come back again and they would say a few other things. I think that God certainly was a hand in all of it. Sometimes that person that had experienced the grief and knew how to get through it would help and support those others. So yeah, it was marvelous. And then when we pray together, I think that was also a big part of it, that they knew that they were going to get through it.
I think it creates something much more concrete for people. That I was also sharing earlier, that sometimes we struggle a little bit with how to approach somebody who's lost a loved one, and we try to figure out how to speak with charity and how to be there. But sometimes words fail us, and so we feel like we just kind of fumble through it. I'll pray for you, but I feel like the support group, like the grief support group, actually provides something concrete and tangible. It's not just I will pray for you in some abstract way. It's we're praying right here.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So are you still involved in that, Diane? I know you said that started a while ago, over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So are you still involved?
I'm not involved with it now. They have other leaders, and I had to stop with a grief support group when I took care of my mother. So I wasn't able to get back to come to the meetings. There were two things that, still thinking about the grief support group, one is that it was important for people to know that when they go through this grief process, that there is an end, that they do come, and that we would have little graduations. We'd say, you don't have to come anymore. You're able to incorporate this. And if they could verbalize that was kind of an important part of our group.
Wow.
I think that's one of the things that started the let's get together and we'll go to dinner, because the graduates would get together and
that's fantastic.
Continue their experience of life.
Wow.
I feel like that really kind of hones in on almost the message that Christ gives us by his example, right? When he calls people to himself, it starts with, I'm having dinner with you. It's come down from the tree. It's, I'm going to meet you at a well, right? He meets us in these situations. Like he meets us, in grief support or in CCD or in some of these different places. He meets us there, sometimes socially, sometimes educationally, but he always leads us to something a little bit deeper. He leads us to himself in a particular way. And so I think that's kind of a little representative of this transition that you've had from CCD so many years ago to grief support for 20 years. But also it's led you into a lot of ministries even at the present, whether it's kind of more prayerful ministries. I don't want to say that the other ones are not prayerful, but ministries that are kind of more rooted on prayer. So you are kind of our spearhead in the parish for our Rosary ministry and our prayer shawl ministry.
Well, not prayer shawl.
Oh, okay.
Bible study.
Bible studies, that's it too.
Yeah. The Rosary ministry, I have to blame it all on my mother.
Okay.
She taught me how to make the rosary. She taught us how to make cord rosaries, I think, in the 80s. And it was kind of part of what I did. In fact, my mother was the one that she taught us how to pray the rosary. And when we prayed at home, it was always the rosary. So she taught us how to make the rosaries, and that was a nice craft for me at first. And then I just grew in that experience of the rosary. I guess it was in 2014, a few years ago, I got a call from Brenda Zeff, and she said, I understand you know how to make rosaries. I said, I sure do. She said, would you teach me? I said, of course. So she came over one day, and I taught her how to make the rosary, and she thought, this is great. She called me the next week and she said, this is so easy. We need to teach other people how to make rosaries. So that was the beginning of our rosary ministry. And we did get the support of Knights of Columbus. And first year we made 600. And then every few months we would teach more people. And last year our group made 12,660 rosaries.
Holy smokes.
We sent them to the missions. I think there's probably 20 or 30 people that in our church now that are active in making rosaries. So we send them to the foreign missions, and then we also have them all over our church board. We have them in all of our some of our community programs and the parish programs. So, and we always encourage other people to learn, because people say, well, why do you pray the rosary? Or what's so important about the rosary? Well, I always tell people we pray the rosary because actually there's rosaries have been known to bring peace, to convert sinners, and to win wars. So that's a good reason to pray the rosary.
Those are great reasons.
Yeah.
The rosary is it's a tool, but it's also, for me, I don't know about you guys, but when I pray, I get so distracted sometimes. Sometimes one of the hardest things to do is in the middle of prayer to sometimes just be wrapped up in the goodness of the prayer. And then recognized that my mind had just wandered somewhere completely different from the prayer. And a rosary for me is an anchor. I can kind of snap back to being, wait, okay, I'm on bead number 4, right? It helps keep me focused and is great. So really also, one of the things that I appreciate about the Rosary ministry is that anybody can walk into the church. I should say anybody who's part of it can walk into the church, and right there at the front desk are sort of like prepared kits. The cords are all laid out, the beads are all in there, the how to make a rosary is there. And so all the little pieces, you just got to pick up a packet and say, I promise to turn these into rosaries. And then they just return them back to the church, and they go into the missions, like you said, and everything. How long have we been doing this? You said 2014?
14. Yeah.
So that's 7 years times 12,000 rosaries. That's a lot of rosaries. That's a lot of rosaries.
Well, I said one time my goal was to bring people to prayer. And if we can put a rosary in as many hands as we can, that's going to be a lot of prayer.
That's amazing.
So that's one of our main devotees.
I think the opportunity to take a skill that you have and to place it at the service of the church for the spiritual benefit of the church is like a trifecta of good things. It's like you're using the talent God gave you, you're using it for the church he gave us, and you're using it for the spiritual benefit of the people who take advantage of the rosary, but like who will benefit from the prayers. So that's a great way to, no pun intended, a great way to tie the church together.
Well, every once in a while, I would get a comment from someone that's learned, and one of the ones that I remember the most is that she said, "Once I start making the rosaries, my prayer life has changed." Ooh. And then other people have said, it's a really calming thing for me to do. And then when we meet with the rosary, we can also talk about Mary, which is a good thing. We'll bring people closer to Mary through the rosary.
That's amazing. I think sometimes we kind of compartmentalize our lives. Like, this is my prayer life, this is my crafting time, this is my social time. But it's amazing when you can see that God, like I should say, like faith in God pulls everything together, right? It's a lesson on life and a lesson on living, authentic prayer and service to the church. So what a great gift. No wonder you would have put Mary as one of your top cathedral people.
Oh, yeah. She's my go-to.
She's so good. Well, I'll say one of the amazing fruits that have come out of this that I saw, because it happened, I got here in June. It was end of June when I got here, and by mid-August, all the students are returning back to college. And somebody over on our young adult ministries side had just kind of come to the conclusion or the idea that said, well, we should probably get rosaries in the hands of our students that are going back to college. And so very quickly, the rosary group came up with a plan to create rosaries for any student going back to college in the students' school colors.
That's awesome.
And I mean, those rosaries came in fast. Mm-hmm. So not only did they answer the call to make the rosaries, but they went and got beads that matched the colors of every university that was requested, and then made the rosaries and brought them back in time for the kids that were going back to college. So
yeah. Well, we have a wonderful lady who actually orders our supplies, and Jane was very in tune with that.
Yeah.
And she will try to get the rosaries that we want. In the past, we had one lady that would make the rosaries in the colors of the high school colors. So
that's
they had
fantastic.
little Catholic groups, and they would get the color of their rosaries. We've made camouflage rosaries to represent military people.
Sure.
And one of the first couple years we made redskin colored rosaries for Father Noah.
For Father Bob, some Washington football team.
Yeah, he's always praying for that team, so I thought we'd have to help him,
Oh, that's wild. That's funny. I had a rosary once that was given to me by my vocation director when I got ordained a priest, and it was a fisherman's rosary because I was becoming a fisherman, right? Uh-oh. And it was made from not the plastic fishing line, but it was made from like fishing cord. Right.
Oh,
so it was a very thick cord that they had attached the lead weights to. So it was like lead fishing weights. It was a very heavy rosary, but it was so cool because every time I prayed it, my hand would smell like when you've been holding on to lead, right? Like a little bit of that. So you felt like you really prayed a rosary because you're like, it was different. But I ended up having to give it to somebody because it was the only rosary that I had on me. And I had a person who was in a real crisis situation, so I had to let him have the rosary because I knew spiritually he needed it more than me. So right now I pray for that guy who has my rosary, and I hope one day I'll get it back, but I'm not going to hold my breath, and I just hope he's still praying it. But so we have to ask her the question.
Which question? I was good. I was going to keep building
go
off.
for it.
I actually, I was just curious. We're talking about like the fruits of the different ministry and the different work. What would you say has been the biggest impact in your life from praying the Rosary on a regular basis? Is there any sort of change in your own life, whether it's spiritually or just kind of personally in your everyday life, a change that you've seen from growing closer to Our Lady, to Christ through the Rosary?
That's an easy question, but yet a hard question to answer at the same time. I've seen the results of prayer. I think I've seen answered prayer, which I don't think we often get the answers to our prayer. We just trust Mary was taking care of our family, and she's taking care of she's taking care of what is needed the most. Who are we to say we should do this or that? But she knows the will of God, and so we go to her and we trust Mary. But I have seen the answer to prayer. Can I share?
Yes,
Sure, please.
The little miracle that happened. There were several miracles in our life. I had a son who was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was 48 years old, and he spent 2 years going through chemo every other week. And he suffered with several of the complications. And one of the complications was some kind of an irritation, and he had the hiccups. And he had the hiccups for 12 days. So it interfered with his eating and his sleeping, and it was in pain. And he went through everything he could think of. They gave him drugs that would convinced him this would take care of your hiccups. You won't have them anymore. He ended up in the emergency room with the side effect of the medication. They sent him home still with the hiccups. So one of the things that my son did for an activity was to make rosaries. Of course, his mother taught him how to make rosaries because he said, I need something to do with my hands. So he made rosaries, and we would give them away. We'd give them to our friends. And his thought was, well, if I make a rosary and I give it to somebody, then they'll pray for me. So he understood the power of prayer. So one Sunday, he was still having the hiccups. He made a rosary, and I gave it to one of my friends after Mass. And I said, here, this is a rosary Brian made. Would you pray for him when you pray it? So to make the long story short, later I found out that evening she wasn't able to sleep. She woke up about midnight. She said, oh, well, I'll pray the rosary and go back to sleep. The next morning, my son called me and he said, Mom, you won't believe what happened. At 12:30 last night, my hiccups stopped.
No way.
Oh, my gosh.
They never came back.
No way. That's awesome.
So was that an answer to prayer? Of course.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Now, that's happened several times. So I would tell my Bible study ladies, I said, if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you think you should pray a rosary, I said, pray it, because somebody's going to be healed. And I just know it. And that's happened a couple times with Brian and me. I would wake up, he would say, oh, that pain stopped last night. I said, what time was it? He said, about 3 o'clock. I said, that's right.
God is never outdone in generosity.
So God is, we've been so blessed with, we know that our prayers are heard, and that if it is God's will, that, he will take care of us.
And I think that's a really important thing to kind of stress, is God's will.
Sure. No, that's absolutely true. I think sometimes we forget, like, our prayer shouldn't be like mechanical. God's not a Coke machine. If I say the rosary, this thing will happen. Mm-hmm. But we say the rosary and entrust our prayers and everything, like the people we offer up, we entrust them to God. And it's not like God isn't going to come through for us in those situations. So you just never know. You never know. I always think he finds the way to surprise us, because, you can't make him up. Like, you can't make up, it happened 12:30 at night, and both people remember the time that they prayed the rosary and that they stopped the hiccups, So I think at the end of the day, God is just going to do his thing, and half the time we are just surprised at how generous and how good he is. How amazing is that? Yep. So, well, we have to ask you, Diane Fields. We've been asking everybody. This is going to be our question. Everybody does this, and they have a habit of doing this, but it's different for everyone, and the reasons are always different. And so Mary and I are really fascinated to find out this question. So don't worry, we didn't prep you for this question, but we 100% know that you know the answer to this question. So when you go to church, where is your pew? Where do you sit in the church?
When we go into church, we always go up towards the front, and we sit somewhere in maybe the middle section. If I had to say, why do we choose that place? It makes me think of people want to belong to a church. They want to belong. They want to come in, and they don't want to feel like they're strangers or they're not wanted. So I think that's a place right in the middle when I'm surrounded by people that I just belong. I belong in this place, and I'm comfortable.
Wow.
That's why, I don't want to sit on the outside or don't want to sit way in the back. I can't see what's going on. Yeah, so I think I just kind of belong right there in the middle.
Perfect.
So beautiful, especially
love
because so many people are looking for belonging. They're looking for community, family, identity. So I love how you say that. You can find that simple peace, that simple feeling of belonging just in where you sit by making that intentional decision to sit among the community, among the people in a church.
Amen. Amen. Wow. Hard to believe that we've only scratched the surface of all of the things that Diane does. But if you look at our bulletin or on our website, you can see a large number of our different kinds of ministries. There are tons of things that you could find Diane and many other of our wonderful parishioners at. You can find information on becoming our rosary maker, more information on the Bible studies and the different ways that Diane and many others still continue that education, sometimes with CCD, but also with other ways of growing. We never really stop learning about our faith.
We never stop learning.
So
you can also find more information too on the grief support group on our website that, like Diane say, they meet twice a month. Is that right? Yeah. So that's always a resource for you.
And all of it's on www.nativityburke.org.
That's right.
And you can find us all there and find more information there and in our bulletin, and certainly by stopping by our church. We are so grateful to have you, Diane, with us. And before that, do we have any shout outs or anything that we're excited about?
Oh, she's the first person that came on my mind. So I'm going to give her a shout out. Aisha Kenner.
Aisha.
Diane is smiling next to me. Aisha works in our office. She's kind of an admin assistant. She's only been working with us for like maybe 2.5, 3 years, maybe a little bit less. But she has become such a part of our community here, of our culture in the office. She's such a wonderful person. She's such a joy and a fabulous cook. She's just a woman of many, many talents. So just a shout out to Aisha Kenner. If you see her around the office, she pops in and out, say hi.
Amen. And with that, we are just so grateful for you, for tuning in, for listening to us. We've got more content coming up next week. Not so much next week, but beyond and beyond and beyond. Thank you guys so much. You are in our prayers. And from all of us here at Nativity and Burke, God bless you and have a great day.